Good evening, everybody. Chick here. I'd like to welcome you to episode 18 of the 77-day video challenge. Tonight, I'm going to share with you a story that I call The Little Yellow Monkey. Now, I know with a title like that, it might sound like a light, fun story. But in all reality, it is the story of a very deep resentment that lasted over 40 years to someone that I grew up with, um, part of my family, and I held this resentment was so deep that not only did I resent him, but if I met somebody with his name, I automatically didn't like them. It didn't matter what they did. If I met anyone who reminded me of him, I had a bad first impression and I never allowed that to change. And I didn't even know why until sat down and began to actually examine my life, list resentments, and try to figure out where they came from. Now I'm going to take you all the way back to around 1956. I'm 5 years old. This relative is 8. And although he's 3 years older than I am, we were about the same size and we wound up actually graduating the same year of high school together, and spent a lot of time together throughout our whole lives. But I was never comfortable around him and I could never quite figure out why I had this this ongoing resentment against him. Until I sat down and looked really hard and prayed and asked God to show me where this came from. And it took me back to the two of us playing in my side yard. And at that time, remember I'm 5 years old, my favorite toy in the whole world was this little hard rubber molded plastic yellow monkey. Well, actually, it wasn't a monkey, it was a gorilla. And he was going like this. And he was part of a jungle set that I'd gotten. And for some reason, this was my favorite toy in the whole world. And as we sat playing, my friend picked up the toy and he looked at me and he said, "You can either give me this or I'm gonna burn it." And with no hesitation at all, I looked him dead in the eye. He wasn't going to get the best of me. And I said, "Burn it." And he did. And I held that resentment for over 40 years. Now, as I began to look back at that, I thought, that's a really silly thing to hold a resentment that long about. And I got to thinking when it got to what I could have done differently. And it brought me right to the book of Solomon when the two women claimed the baby, both women claimed the same baby, and Solomon, in his wisdom, said, split it in half and give each mother a half of the baby. And of course, one of the women went, "No, no, 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 no." Solomon knew exactly who the baby belonged to and gave it to the real mother. Now, what's this got to do with a little yellow monkey? Well, if I'd had just a little bit of the wisdom of Solomon, I could have said to him, "You keep it." And then I could have went and told my mom and she'd have got it back for me. But it was my pride and my ego that allowed my favorite toy in the whole world to be destroyed rather than to give it to somebody else. The best part about this is, after making this, it still took me a couple more years to get up the courage to go and make an amends to him for all the wrongs I'd done for him through our life from this silly little thing when we were kids. And it took me a while to build up the courage to go sit down and tell him. And when I finally worked up the courage, my wife and I went to visit he and his wife at their house, and we were sitting down and we were drinking a glass of iced tea, and I looked over and I said, you know, I have to tell you that I'm here to ask you forgiveness for holding this resentment against you for all these years. And he says, what was that all about? And when I told him, he looked at me and he said, what are you talking about? I don't remember that at all. See, for over 40 years, I held a resentment, had myself locked up in a prison that he didn't even know about. So when you examine your own life, stop and think, is this really worth it? Or is forgiveness not releasing them, but releasing you, as it did for me? Have a great night, and I'll see you guys tomorrow, one day at a time.